Code on this. Hi everyone, this is the SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting that specializes on kubeadm implementation, details, and design for the next cycle, which is 1.9. And today is the 1st of November. And first up on the agenda is etcd and what version we should use in 1.9 and how to upgrade.
So we missed the boat in the 1.8 series to get the update to 3.1, and we do not have time to qualify a 3.0.17 to a 3.2.9 upgrade. I don't think people can test it, but I don't know if CoreOS has explicitly stated they have not done that regression testing. Because I talked to Jiyoung on about that, and he said that they have not done it. So I think for new clusters, blowing out at 3, if we're going to, especially if we're going to have the HA feature available, blowing out at 3.2 is probably pretty important. And I talked with Clayton too as well, and he had mentioned that they are skewing the client to the version that they're currently running. So they're running a 3.2 client to get to 3.1, and we've done that on many releases. The client version doesn't need to match directly with the version that's deployed. So I'm going to rev the client in the entire depth graph for etcd right now and get that up to hopefully solve some of the problems that folks have reported out in the wild.
So what are some of the issues? Because I was reading something on the etcd operator the other day, and I can't quite remember who said it, but he said that there's currently like an upstream etcd issue with HA in terms of like if etcd goes down, basically like the API server can reconnect or something like that. Does that correlate with what you're saying, or is that a separate issue?
There is a link to the issue. I have so many issues in my backlog. Do you have it handy at all, Lucas? I can find it.
Not right now.
I will look up the issue and link to it both in the doc and I'll post in chat. Okay. But it's pretty nasty, and it's a known issue that we've uncovered a while ago, which is a little sad that we didn't get the ball rolling earlier.
Yeah, so while we're talking about etcd versions, so in the review for the API thing, which just got merged, Fabrizio raised like a really good point in terms of right now we're not exposing version choices to kubeadm users. So, you know, do we want to expose that choice to users in 1.9, right? So if I'm a user, is it reasonable for me to expect my etcd to run like 3.1 blah, 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 or should we like, is that like an internal implementation detail where we should always default to our own personal choice?
We should always default to the one that's been vetted by upstream.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's...
Feel free.
Go ahead.
Well, we do kind of support it, as you can set just the image field, right? You can override it. So 3.2 in 1.8 if you wanted to, but we don't recommend that, and you're kind of on your own if you do so.
So sorry, so can you repeat that? So we expose the image. What was that you just said?
Yeah, we expose the image field in the config API.
Okay. So because like one of the spec fields for like a cluster that's going to be sent to the operator is an etcd version string, right? So I'm just trying to figure out like the expected behavior of this of sort of HA self-hosted etcd, whether we should even expose that version as an option to the user, or whether we should just sort of always assume that we know best.
I would always assume that we know best for a time being.
Sure.
Because we're still alpha. I mean, eventually over time, we might want to have a knob to support. We might want to have a knob with a default, right? And if, it's like, super experimental, buyer beware, you're going to blast your own foot off with a foot gun type of knob,
Kubernetes has those, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, so just to recap what you said there, the etcd client version inside of the API server doesn't have to match the etcd server version, but I assume that the client should be higher than the server or equal to.
It can be skewed by one minor version. And we've done this across a number of releases, and I'm going to push to get that change upstream so we get all the test cycles now. So long as we get all the test cycles now, we should be good. And that way, you know, matching the server version would be a harder shift, because then we'll have to go through the upgrade process, but we might want to make that case given the issue that we've seen. So
yeah. So I was thinking, like, if the built-in client in the API server is, let's say, 3.0 and the etcd server version is 3.2, is that a supported, like when the server version is higher than the client, right? The client has to be higher.
In the it doesn't always have to be higher, but it can't be off by more than more than one minor release. So in 1.8 we released a 3.1 client against a 3.0 target server version, right? And we did. Because
exactly.
I had prepped all of 1.8 to get ready for, and we had that PR that languished. So everything in 1.8 was prepped to go out with 3.1, and 1.8, for whatever reason, that PR did not get merged, and I didn't follow back up on it. And then I think another person, Hung Chow, I think, made the original PR. I think it kind of dropped off the radar.
Yeah.
And then this next cycle, we already got that PR merged, so now we're planning to have 3.1x on the server side, but I'm doing the PR right now to get 3.2 client in place. So we'll have the same skew off by one in the API server, but I think for new clusters, especially for kubeadm, just to avoid a set of scenarios which could be really bad, especially if we're doing alpha feature gated high availability, we can just default that to 3.2. I think it's 3.2.9 from looking at this morning.
Cool. So then we get to the question: how should we upgrade etcd for users that are currently running Kubernetes 1.8 and etcd server 3.0?
I think defaultly going to 3.1 is the safest bet, and just smashing the YAML is Hulk smash YAML is totally fine, because it'll restart itself.
Yeah, I mean, I tested that locally, and well, it seemed to work. Should we? Well, so in UX terms, should we do the etcd upgrade when you do upgrade apply, or should it be a separate procedure? Or can we somehow feature gate or conditionally flag this, like, well, we'll do this by default, but if you want to opt out of upgrading etcd, you can disable this?
Maybe it could be a separate. So are you talking about in terms of kubeadm upgrade, the phase, right?
Yeah. So like in terms of kubeadm upgrade UX.
Mm-hmm. So how realistic is it for somebody to not want to upgrade etcd as part of the normal upgrade procedure? Is it like a common scenario? I mean, I guess it could be, because if I'm running an external etcd and then if I'm running an external etcd, I'm not going to want for you to attempt to back up my etcd, right? So maybe we could sort of have that as a separate command, as you said, where we would perform additional like backup procedures, like data backup as well.
I think there's nothing wrong with having the, I don't want to play favorites, but I work for a company that helps make a backup thing. So, but having an explicit call out to say, like, having a backup upgrade, and then if anything bad, and then a qualification, right? Because qualification being the conformance test, and if anything fails in that process, you can always restore, right? That seems like a legitimate thing to do. I think as long as kubeadm can detect if the configuration has a local etcd, which it should be in the conf thing that's now stored in a config map, right? So it should be able to detect that it's there, and then automatically do the upgrade if it laid down the version, and that seems like a legit thing to do. If it's external, then somebody else is going to have to manage that separately anyways. So
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to deal with this with the HA configuration.
So for that, I think you can just delegate to the operator. It exposes an API for cluster upgrades itself, so we can just pass it over, I think.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So just to try to summarize there, we'll detect whether etcd is locally hosted or externally hosted. Then we'll attempt, well, if it's locally, we'll back up in some way, or should we just leave this on the user? And like if then we'll, and the second question is, should we do this right before or right after we have upgraded the control plane?
Before.
Before.
Before. I would also think like we could call out instructions. It's best practice to back up before you upgrade.
I mean,
some people might YOLO, right?
But like, I'm just trying to think in terms of the UX here. I mean, backing up. So there's 2 points here. Like, it would be nice for me as a user to have a local backup just in case something goes wrong, just for future reference, perhaps like a tarball of my etcd state. And secondly, like, if we were to do rollback, say something went wrong with etcd upgrades, we're going to have to roll back to some state, right? In which case, I think we would need a backup file in some variety, right? So kubeadm might have to do that anyway.
Okay, then could we? Okay, so I'll write that down. The etcd upgrade will be done before.
So I have a question. I apologize if this is not obvious to me, but like, how big can these backups get? I mean, can they be big enough, substantial enough that you could run into a situation where you're backing up, taking a lot of disk space and somehow interfering with the workloads going on in that master node?
It's definitely possible. I mean, it really depends on like the size of your Kubernetes cluster and how many resources are being persisted to etcd, right? I mean, but I don't know. I mean, that is probably that's something that the user's going to have to figure out by themselves. We can't really handhold them to that degree, I don't think, but we can sort of spec out hardware requirements. And I mean, like, where do you draw the line there, right? I mean, we can definitely document it and sort of say, you know, or we could maybe even add like a separate command sort of saying, okay, based on our prediction, this is going to take up blah, 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 blah. Do you have that? I mean, that's an option too, but yeah.
Okay.
I think we should make it easy to do and call out instructions where possible. But I think there's a line that we don't want to partake in, which is like, the backup aspects are separate, right? That's orthogonal to the behavior of kubeadm proper, and we can delegate that to other tools to manage that risk. Or we're basically saying it's your problem.
Yeah. So in terms of like actual action items, we'll upgrade before the control plane. We'll just check that etcd Kubernetes manifest etcd YAML is there, right?
Yes.
Like the static pod. Well, we might want to do just copy of varlib etcd, right? Like the actual directory. We might want to copy that, like not getting into the application level backups. Instead we'll do a file system level backup, maybe. Yeah. Then we'll copy, like the normal upgrade procedure for control planes is we'll copy the current etcd manifest into a backup directory. We'll write the new one. etcd should restart and everything should be fine. If things like fail, then we'll like just move the file from the backup directory, the static pod file, from the backup directory to the actual location. We'll see if etcd comes online again, like with the previous version, and like then we might in the end want to have this optional hook, like, okay, we try to roll from 3.0 to 3.1. It didn't work. We tried to roll back to 3.0, but it didn't come up successfully that either. So we're now gonna roll back to the actual file system state that were before. So is the last step necessary or not?
You went through many steps. The problem I had was along the way, there's a piece that's missing, and that when you do the upgrade, do we want to have a save file of some kind for the previous version, and some metadata in the new one that specifies, the old one was this?
So no, I don't think so. Instead, like the current upgrade procedure is basically shuffling files around on disk, right? We have the current 1.7 manifest, API 7 manifest. We'll just copy that to, well, actually we'll move that to a backup directory. We'll write the new file, which is 1.8 API server. Then if something goes wrong, we'll just move that old file from the backup directory back to the actual real location. And we could do the same with etcd with the optional hook to actually back up the data in varlib etcd before, and optional rollback if everything else fails.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you could also leave that last step as like a documentation too, right? Like, so we snapshotted the state pre-upgrade to this location. Like, do it yourself, jazz hands kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I actually like that a lot, because then we're not like mucking with user data, right? We just took a snapshot. Well, if things did go wrong, it's basically one single command you have to do on the command line. So it's kind of straightforward. I think that's the best, and then we'll leave this whole thing optional from the command line, right? So you can opt out of this upgrade if you want, but again, then you're kind of on your own, because we've upgraded the in client, the in API server client to 3.2. So if you're staying on 3.0, you might or might not have problems.
Yeah. And then for the HA stuff, we can probably avoid this process entirely. We might not even have to back up, because I assume the operator backs up things anyway. It has mechanisms for backup. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a case of executing like a HTTP request to some endpoint, and then from, I don't know, we might have to like wait perhaps and do some health checks to like make sure that state has been reconciled, and then we can proceed with the rest of the control plane upgrade. But yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Anything else along those lines? And yeah, just to know that I think, I don't even think we have got one issue with kubeadm upgrade so far. Jamie, have you seen something?
No.
I haven't. So, I mean, this should be kind of really safe, because, well, CoreOS does a lot of regression testing between these queues. So, well, and the overall kubeadm upgrade command seems to be stable, like the procedure we're doing. So cool.
So just another consideration there, like what are the end-to-end tests for this going to look like?
Well, we'll just do this, as will be the default behavior, right? It will automatically be done for every CI run, which runs once an hour or so.
Okay.
So if we start seeing things failing there, we should look into it, but I wouldn't expect that. Okay. Surprisingly, CNI 06 has some known integration issues with the kubelet. It's not directly on our plate, but we should definitely be aware of it. I think the Node team is looking into it.
Okay. Do we have, are there updated binaries already in repositories for 060?
No.
Not yet. Who's got the magic fingers and bits to make that happen? Mike Denise or somebody else?
A Googler. But, well, yeah. So, well, anyone can send the packaging PR, which is already there, but I just put it on hold because I don't necessarily want to release this thing before
the kubelet
before we have 1.9 out. So I think that will be done atomically.
The problem is, like, right now the end-to-end test for kubeadm's baking is not against 060, right? And
they are.
They are?
Yeah.
So, you're referencing, is it using the Bazel build?
Yeah. So,
okay.
I mean, it's insane because our E2E testing doesn't test anything from our actual builds, right? So they are totally separate and different languages and stuff. So,
well, okay.
But yeah, our E2E tests do test with 06.
Okay, so as long as we get the binaries updated soonish and have it on the radar for release, folks. I don't know who's going to be who in SIG Cluster Lifecycle is going to be part of the release this cycle.
Well, I've been a part of release from our from our standpoint, like from the 3 latest releases. So why not the 4th?
Yeah, but okay. Well, as long as we make sure that all the bits get in place, I'll be okay. I'll make sure I get the etcd side of the house in place. So.
Yeah, cool. And well, obviously, it would be nice to get some better packaging things as well. But yeah, I mean,
I'm going to push all my packaging
into
Bazel, right?
Yeah.
So.
We're basically waiting for Bazel to support multiple architectures. Then we can shove everything over and start doing the real thing, TM. Okay, so just a heads up there because it affects us to some degree. Then we have two other like whatever PSAs. I've been reviewing lots of PRs recently that are targeting IPv6 support for kubeadm clusters in 1.9. Well, it has basically been things like, well, if you set the advertised address of the API server to an IPv6 address, it will not try to like health check on localhost, like on the IPv4 address to localhost. It will use the IPv6 variant and things like that. So small changes that basically swap out IPv4 addresses to IPv6 in case you opt into it. This is, from what I understand, one of the major themes. And here is CNI 06 is required here. So, I mean, it's, well, kind of, they go hand in hand. Any questions, comments there?
The only thing I can think of is that, is it an all or nothing IPv6? Because there was like, I don't know, it's, my previous experience has been there were transition steps that people have used, like a transition stage for IPv6 to 4 conversions. But is it an all or nothing flag that that the user has control over?
Yeah, so I don't think this is something like they're targeting for old clusters. Like that's, I don't think they're targeting an upgrade scenario here. For new clusters,
It's fresh.
yeah. For new clusters, I think it's basically if you like opt into it, it will do everything IPv6 from what I'm seeing. But generally, they wrote somewhere that if you don't like opt into it, everything will be IPv4. So I think it's kind of all or nothing situation. I'm not even sure like how it can be mixed in all like this huge matrix of components.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there.
Me neither.
If somebody from networking wants to come and give the TLDR of what the state of IPv6 is and plans for support, then I'll listen. But I don't know. IPv6 is always 2 years away to me. And it's been that way since 2011.
Yeah, I can actually ask him if he could come the next week. Then we have
that would actually be helpful, because I do know there are people like Cisco, for example, would love to have IPv6 across the board and have a solution for networking that is fast and gets rid of a bunch of stuff. So that is a cool option, but provided we have the plumbing, that's going to be the key, I think.
Yeah, and another one is Windows support for kubeadm join, which is cool. It's it's really the same. I mean, kubeadm join doesn't do anything really, right? Nowadays it's basically doing the discovery and writing down that file, right? So it's basically just this validation flow that can I trust the master, and this procedure of writing down this file is going to be supported on Windows pretty easily. I mean, they had to rewrite, like make the pre-flight checks work, and yeah, make the pre-flight check work and plumb like parameterize the path where to write the file.
Is there going to be any tests for any Windows stuff or any federated testing for that?
Yeah, that's actually my question to him soonish. I mean, it's not kubeadm's. I mean, well, it's kind of this big, like they have to somehow run the kubelet in a way. I don't know how they do it, right? So, and not the kube proxy either, or how they package CNI, things like that. So, in this kubeadm join support is just writing down this file, so the kubelet then can bootstrap itself and do stuff. But yeah, I mean, I would love testing. I don't know if they even have EDE anywhere in the project for Windows. But yeah.
What's the state of multi-master? Oh, we don't have that yet, right? Is that like an ongoing work item or something like that? Being able to join masters to a current cluster?
So, well, that's the AJ thing that's next up, right?
Right. Because I thought I saw like a pull request recently, which has been on hold for a while. I just don't know what the status of that was. I think somebody tried to add it or something.
Oh yeah, so that pull request was kind of like you had to, it would write out a file with all the certificates as blobs in it, right? And then you would transfer this file out of band to your master B, and then run kubeadm in it again with that master file, with that file. And well, you would have two masters, right? And then you have to aggregate them with a load balancer of some kind. So it was half-baked, right? I don't see, and as I've written in the issue, I don't see it getting merged. Yeah, so there we had some.
Okay, yeah, I need to read the comments on that. So, what do you think is the best approach moving forward? Like, should we encourage him to close it? Should we, try and extend his commit and improve that output thing, or what do we need to do to get multi-master to work? Is it even a requirement for HA19? I guess it is, right?
Yeah. So, that's the thing we're trying to implement now with the latest proposal. I had hoped Fabrizio would be here today. Probably the time zones, yeah. If he didn't notice, because for me it's in Europe, it's 1 hour earlier.
The weekend in the US, right? So. Okay. Yeah, I need to read through that HA proposal. I answered some of the questions about the operator in it, but yeah, I need to go through it and look at the implementation details. Has anybody volunteered to act on that document and to implement multi-mast, or is it still like in review stage, that doc?
So
because like I might have some time over the next week or so if I clear up the operator stuff quickly. So
whoa. That was my next question and topic. And just to state that, well, we now have a proposal. Fabrizio has been really kind and summarized my and Tim's thoughts from earlier and added some new stuff as we did discuss 1 or 2 weeks ago. And now we have to attack on this. Otherwise, it won't make the release. I just LGTM'd your etcd self-hosting PR, etcd operator PR for the API types. It got merged now. We need to build more on that one so we can get the etcd operator in full working. After that, will Mike's PR for the union or not union authorizer should soon be merged, I think, as well, which makes it possible to lock down the secrets a bit more. Then.
So do we need do we need Mike's pull request before the operator one can be merged? It's like a requirement, right?
They are in parallel. And right now, Mike's PR is more nice to have, right?
And well, the operator will live behind a feature gate too.
Yeah,
right.
So you have to explicitly opt into it.
Okay.
Yeah, everything will be like you added the feature gate, Jamie, a week ago or so. Yeah. Everything will be behind that one, so you can opt into the AJ stuff, or you can leave it. Right?
So on the topic of feature gates, so when you said the next step is to actually implement the operator, I've pretty much done it, but one thing I've noticed is that there's a lot of overlap between the feature flags of high availability and self-hosted. So do we ever expect a scenario for someone to want HA but not self-hosted?
No. So I think
Okay.
We should add something there that, well, if you do feature gate high availability, say that I want this thing, then
Right.
you will have self-hosted as well, because
So like HA is a subset of self-hosted, basically, right?
Yes.
Yep.
I call it the circle of features. We couldn't have one without the other, and we're starting to actually get the progress now. So, my joke is actually no longer applies because we're actually making the progress. But I think the one thing is the workflow from kubeadm that needs to get done, right? Like that's the big thing. All the other pieces we're still going to default to have everything either using a VIP or a DNS name. So that'll be fine, right? And we'll probably have to, I think join, are you going to say join master and you're going to have that experimental, or are you going to have that be, how are you going to gate the master join?
I don't know. That's another thing we should discuss. I mean, it could be kubeadm alpha join -- master, or it could be kubeadm join alpha master, or whatever UX we choose. But I think that's in the end kind of trivial compared to the other stuff.
Is the plan to, are they going to pass the certs via secrets, or are you going to pass the certs via TRDs?
Via secrets, which makes it for us like a lot less code to write.
Yes, because that's a portion of that's already there.
Well, pretty much everything. I mean, Andrew, hi Andrew, by the way, wrote the code many months ago. I also wrote things along those lines to enhance the flow in right before 1.8, and right now it should just work, right?
Should we add any sec folks into the mix, or is Mike kind of like good enough for the time being? Should we like poke Jordan or Moyer to do like an audit, or should we just say like this is all alpha, we'll audit next release cycle? Because I'm totally cool with that too, for this iteration.
Yes. So why I didn't want secrets is because, well, as we've said, I mean, it's not secure right now. So that, at least not that secure that we want it to be. So an audit would just like be, well, this is kind of like suboptimal, right? That will be the obvious, because, well, I've researched there as well and tried to think about the different scenarios. There's an ongoing in parallel feature from Sigot and Jordan as well regarding the node authorizer. Like, how can I say what labels a node is like can register itself with? How can I let a node delete itself? How can I like say that, well, you shouldn't be able to like add this label after you have registered? Things like that, because we don't want a situation where a node and its credential can just say, well, I want to patch myself and add the master label. Then I will get, via scheduling daemon sets, I will get access to all the secrets of the control plane, and, well, I've graduated from a node to a master, which makes a node token basically a root identity in the cluster. That is like super easy to escalate, right? So that's one of the problems with this flow, and that is one of the reasons I wanted to go with the CRD thing and things like that. But in the end, we also have to like realize that Sigot is working on this, and it will get better as we go. I recently got a status update from Mike, where he said that it won't probably make this thing that a node shouldn't be able to re-register itself or change the labels won't make 1.9. I assume that hopefully 1.10.
So long as we'll just remain in alpha for some period of time until all of these things are available. And that's totally cool with me too. So I think, we're going to go out with alpha this release cycle. We'll probably just stay in alpha until that audit is good enough for most folks. And I'm sure there's going to be other bugs we're going to find, because like security is kind of fractal, right? Not kind of, it totally is.
So I mean, there are two obvious ones. One is this, like a node can graduate from node to master really easily. The second hole is that any ingress controller will watch secrets in the whole cluster, which makes your ingress controller like a single point of failure for your CA key. So, which is like obvious when thinking about how it's architected. Therefore we need Mike's PR, which basically adds a new field to the authorizer, an optional field that says denied. And if any of these, you name it, authorizers say return denied, it will deny the request. Currently we union all authorizers, which makes it, if RBAC allows it, my ingress controller should be able to access all secrets. Then the authorization result will be granted. But in this case, we have to do some kind of authorizer or whatever, probably out of core at first, some daemon running somewhere, I don't know, that basically answers if this is a cluster credential created by kubeadm, we should deny this request unless it's coming from the super user of the cluster. So those are the two main ones security-wise. But yeah, I mean, this is just for getting the ball rolling. And if we end up in a place that we don't see any path forward, we just have to reconsider, stay in alpha, and re-architect and don't use secrets if it turns out to be totally not usable. Worth mentioning is that CoreOS do this already.
Yep. So I had a question about something completely unrelated, kind of related because it's the operator. But one thing I noticed is that when we have our Bootstrap static pod of etcd, which is first deployed, right? And then the etcd operator is deployed and then it pivots to the new self-hosted version. What's kind of interesting is that when the self-hosted cluster comes up and then it begins that pivot, that migration from the Bootstrap to the new version, the way that it sort of advertises itself is through a DNS name, is through a host name. But the problem is that that relies on cluster DNS, and the static pod isn't synced with the DNS server, right? So my question is how are we going to get that to work? So there's a few options. One is to make the DNS server reside on host network. And that I got it working using that. Basically, by the time that the pivot happens, the DNS server is up, and the static pod can resolve all of the DNS through the DNS server. We can create a temporary DNS server that is on hostnet and then pull it down and then have it not on hostnet. We can try and do some Etsy hosts kind of magic where I'm not sure that even works, but or we can try and send a pull request to etcd operator to sort of make that hostname advertisement optional, and another option is to advertise it through IP addresses, right? So I'm kind of interested. I know, Lucas, you had a strong preference towards not putting the DNS server on the host network. So yeah, I wanted to sort of gather feedback here.
Yeah. So now I understand why you're asking. I didn't have the context and was why. But okay. Yeah, it's really easy. We have no other choice but to have it as a normal workload. Anything else will make the cluster non-conformant and probably break conformance test and everything. We can't do anything that special in this case. So yeah, it has to be a workload with a pod IP, with a service backing it, and a stable service name that is the same that all kubelets use and things like that in the cluster. Otherwise, everything will, everything DNS related will break. So that's to answer your first question. Then I think the best path forward is to just talk to the CoreOS guys, see what they think. Can we advertise on service IP addresses instead? Right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and actually, I think they only added the host names stuff quite recently over the past few months. Before then, it did advertise its service IP, and then they changed that behavior. So hopefully they're receptive to making that configurable at least. So yeah. Cool. Okay, thanks.
Did you have anything to add, Tim?
You pretty much expressed my same opinion, so I'm good.
Cool. So what else? Yeah, so basically we need people that work on stuff. Andrew, do you have cycles to help out on AJ?
It's definitely of interest because we're using kubeadm to create our clusters for our production services. So I can see if the company would be willing to have me put some company time into it. But other than that, I can try to find time on the weekends, definitely.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, so the attack plan is that Jamie does the etcd operator things right now, which will be obviously feature gated. Then the other part, like where you could help the most right now is first specifying the parameters that will be different to the API service. So Tim, we have to do quorum reads, right? To etcd for AJ API service.
It's already defaulted.
Yeah.
So I don't even know why that people. This was an issue with etcd2. I don't know why there's there's weird conversation pieces going on still because there's this API server parameter that says enable quorum reads, but it's defaulted in the client. So I'd have to take a look at the plumbing and verify like what they're doing, but with etcd3. But I know that addition was made a while ago, but it makes no difference in etcd3 that I'm aware of, at least.
Okay. Hopefully that is the case. Anyway, there's a flag, enable quorum reads.
You could default it to true now and you'd be fine, right?
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
mean,
it's going to make any difference.
Yeah. So let's start with like adding that flag when we are behind the feature gate. Also, we need to use the new alpha reconciler written by Ryan Phillips or something from CoreOS early in the cycle, which basically is a better way for the API service to manage the internal Kubernetes endpoint. So right now, if you add master 1, master 2, and master 2 goes down, 50% of the traffic in the cluster will go into a dark hole as you will try to address master 2, which is down. So the new reconciler will make master 1 that is still alive, remove the endpoint to master 2. So that would be a first PR to make. Just enable those 2 params, I think, in the API server while being behind the feature gate. Then the second step would be to try out the kube proxy tinkering. I think may work, but so after these new Envoy announcements that have been made from Heptio, do you have any status Tim, do you think this is something we could do for 1.9, or is it further down the road, later down the road?
Further down the road. The stuff we have right now is for ingress primarily, right? Eventually, the ability to have Envoy has so many capabilities is kind of really interesting. The potential use cases are pretty dramatic, and it solves an abstraction layer that I think would be cool to solve in different use cases. I think I'd like to enqueue us to start tinkering with it, and I'm going to talk with Dave too as well about not Contour, because Contour is very specific right now, but the use case of having it live as the potential proxy to get to the main API servers, right?
Yeah. So Andrew, meanwhile, we're planning to, well, in lack of a better solution, we're thinking that the kube proxy might be able to self-host its own VIP. So kubeadm would write down it would make an IP tables rule with the internal Kubernetes service VIP, which is often 10.96.0.1. So kubeadm would write this rule to point to the first master you're joining to, and then everything would go up as normal. Everything would talk to this VIP. Then the kube proxy would come alive and say, well, hey, this Kubernetes service has actually 3 endpoints, and then it would rewrite the rule and have then we would get AJ for free, kind of. The only tricky case is that we have to, after reboot, we have to restore this VIP, so to point to something. So we basically have to checkpoint the IP tables rules. And Kevin Fox had some proposal as well somewhere where he wanted to add checkpointing support into kubeproxy itself, which would be cool, I guess. But nobody has. It hasn't been accepted or something yet by SIG Network. So yeah, those are the 2 next steps, I think. Jamie is gonna. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I hate the idea of checkpointing IP tables rules, but I just want to make sure that's clear. I really don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, well, it would be cool if we could get around it in some other way, but I don't know. I mean, IP tables rules disappear after reboots anyway, and we have to somehow know what the state was like. So, I mean, some kind of checkpointing is required in some way. Anyway, we'll not go into those weeds right now. Yeah, that's the primary effort that also has to be made, and then upgrading a TD and upgrading the self-hosted cluster in a slightly better way are the 4 main four main tasks that has to happen inside of kubeadm for 1.9 to launch. Then we have some smaller issues and improvements as well. But those are the four big ones. etcd operator support, making a node in the cluster able to address all API servers. 3, upgrading etcd when you do kubeadm upgrade apply from 3.0 to 3.1, which we discussed earlier. And 4, upgrade when upgrading a self-hosted cluster, it would be a bit more safe. And this is in the kubeadm upgrade doc, which I've been writing implementation details of. So if like any of you could take that, it would be great. And yeah, we'll just see. But yeah, I think we're out of time. Well, actually, let's see if due to the time zone changes, let's see if folks join. I could do a 10-minute TLDR for folks that missed the meeting, if that's of interest to those who now joined.
Hey, Lucas.
Hi.
Hi. Just wanted to say one thing, that is the calendar invite sent to for like a wrong time? Because I mean, I have an invite that says the meeting was supposed to start now.
I don't know. I mean, so this week is the only week that all calendars are kind of booked, because in Europe we switched the time to 1 hour back in last Sunday, and the US does the similar thing next week. So this week in between, we're 1 hour off, like 1 hour skewed between Europe and the US, which is, well, who knows why.
Okay.
But yeah, do you have any questions? So as I said, I'm happy to do a TLDR of what we said and reiterate.
You remember I filed a bug for that host network pending IP thing. I'm not sure that this is the right forum to discuss that.
I think it might be, but let's see if we have other comments, questions, or other topics related to AJ, self-hosting, and upgrades first. Do you have anything related to those features? Like, you had some upgrade proposals or something like that? Tamal?
Hey.
Did you have any questions or proposals regarding upgrades?
I mean, I had a couple of bugs that I filed. The questions were around basically currently to run the upgrade commands, we have to log into the machine and then run like kubeadm upgrade plan, then upgrade apply. So one of the issues that I filed was that if the kubeadm upgrade plan command could be like made such that it could be run remotely without needing to SSH into the machine, that will allow us to sort of use that from like a web API, so sort of like API that doesn't have to like SSH into the machine all the time, just to check that if even like an update is available. Because we're trying to build like a sort of web API wrapper around the kubeadm, so that people can sort of go to like a website and sort of click a few buttons and create like a cluster. sort of similar to how GKU works, but currently it requires SSHing into the machine to do that. So yeah, so that will be one thing to see if there's any plans for something like this. I mean, is that the I'm the only person who sort of requested for something like this, or is that even sound reasonable to do though? So
you're the only person I've heard asking for it. To answer your question, I don't think it's insane. I mean, that's totally a thing we could do. But what is actually blocking? I mean, why or how doesn't it work already?
So we are trying out the new 8.1 release. So what we have done is like essentially, I told you that we copied some of the code from the kubeadm sort of like the version checker, the version getter stuff, and tried to sort of simulate that essentially from like an API. So yeah, so if we just there are like a couple of issues. The first one is from remotely, it is hard to know what is the current installed version of kubeadmin. So one thing we have done is that we basically like deploy a daemon set, and then the daemon set essentially runs kubeadm version -o short, and then takes the output of that and annotates to the node. So we can look at the node annotations and see what is the kubeadm version now installed. So that's sort of feels hacky, but that's what we did. And so that was the one part. And then the second part was just the code that was in kubeadm version, where basically we look at the remote the download file, which returns like a stable short or stuff like that, and then just essentially copy the logic that looks at the like API server and all the other the components that gets from cluster, and then like essentially sort of runs like a diff type check, right, and then says that this is the version available. So that part of the logic works, but yeah, so that's what we did. But that's just for checking. But if we want to do, but we don't do anything that checks on the local, like on the local directory. Yeah. So it's just for the second part for update plan, and yeah, and then obviously when the actual upgrade command is executed, we have to log into the machine and execute that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, some initial comments there. I think. So I mean, the API server version is easily gettable, and kubeadm gets it from the / version endpoint of the API server. That's fine. It gets the node versions from the node objects in the cluster. That's also fine remotely. It uses like its own compiled metadata inside of the kubeadm binary to get its own version. Which is a thing I don't think we can change, right? I mean, we can't really like get that information from anywhere else, because we're actually trying to resolve how old am I, right? It's basically that kind of query, and I have to question that like from my own metadata, not from anyone else. But I don't think that's a huge problem, because the only thing that kubeadm, the only place where the kubeadm version actually is kind of used is to detect some small-ish cases, like if you want to upgrade a cluster from 181 to 185, and I have a 183 kubeadm client, it will say that, well, you should upgrade kubeadm first to 183. It's a 185, and then you can upgrade your cluster to 185. But in this case, you can just append -f or -f force, and it will do the thing for you, right? Because that's not, it's more of a hygiene thing. Like it's best practice to upgrade your kubeadm client before upgrading Kubernetes version. Because kubeadm, a newer kubeadm version knows what if it has to deal with the newer Kubernetes version in some special way, which actually haven't happened in the latest cycles. So I mean that's kind of safe. So I think kubeadm plan is actually pretty fine. kubeadm apply will almost certainly always be run from the node, like from the actual master itself, and there's a great rationale for this, which is safety. Like so if kubeadm executes on the same node it operates on or for, it can actually make sure that, well, everything goes smoothly, right? So if you're upgrading your master and something goes wrong, it's easy to roll back because I have access to the local files. I can do whatever I want and shuffle files around. If I'm remotely and then with self-hosting trying to rolling upgrade my own API service, there's a bug in a new Kubernetes version or whatever that makes these new API servers fail, I suddenly don't have the endpoint I was talking to anymore, and my cluster is dead. I have no ability to restore the previous environment, as I can't get into the kubelet and just run static pods or whatever to rebootstrap everything, or I can't roll back. So I mean, remotely executable kubeadm apply will, well, it's already working with, if you do enable self-hosting, which is Alpha in 1.8, but, well, I mean, it's far more riskier than actually executing on the node you're on yourself. You see the rationale there?
Yes, I see the rationale, but the issue usually is that like if you are managing your own cluster with kubeadm, then it's probably fine. You always SSH into that. But if you are managing cluster for somebody else, like I mean, it just always feels a bit icky that we have to SSH into that machine, and then like I mean, it's obviously the only option now. Like I just was trying, basically, if there was a way like we could restrict that, like even when we access to that machine, like we don't have any additional permission or like way to do anything more than just like maybe run the kubeadm commands. That will be like the thing. So I looked up that if there is a way to sort of restrict a user who SSH into the machine to like run only like a small set of commands and things like, there are some options. So maybe that's what we need to do.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, it will be possible. It already is possible to run kubeadm apply remotely if you use self-hosting. You can do it just fine. We won't stop you, so, but you will have no rollback capabilities.
Okay. So if we do self-hosting, like then how does the command work remotely? Like,
so it will just talk to the API server and
okay.
deploy, like, well, it's kind of, I mean, I don't know if I should dig down into the implementation details. You can read the proposal there that I have up as a PR right now. But yeah, it will just talk to the API server to rolling upgrade itself, kind of. So, I mean, it does work, but it's not the safest possible way. So if you want to stay safe, well, you should execute on your local node, your local master. If you feel like that you can afford being a little bit riskier, feel free to execute that remotely.
Okay. Is this going to be like a beta in this feature? The self-hosting feature is going to be beta in like next release? Like, what's the plan?
Yeah, we're planning to graduate self-hosting to beta in the next release.
Okay, and that's needed for the high availability thing, right?
Yes.
Like the high availability support. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I don't have any other question on this. I'll take a look at this because it wasn't clear that self-hosting actually already supports something like this. I did remember reading that talk, but it's probably outdated. I don't know. I have to check again. Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be of interest to read my latest blog post on the Kubernetes blog.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was like some days ago published where
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah, I'll
cool.
check that one.
Yeah, so there I talk a bit about self-hosting and just say that you can enable it now. It's alpha. We're trying to graduate that to beta in 1.9. Cool.
Okay. Thanks.
Robert, Tim, and Jamie left. We actually had the meeting.
Did we have it an hour ago?
An hour ago, yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure. We talked about this yesterday, but you weren't at the meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
Whether or not it was to be at 9 a.m. Pacific like normal or 10 a.m. and everybody said they didn't care, so I didn't move the calendar invite and left it at 10 a.m. But I guess it was an hour ago, so that's fine.
Yeah, so that's why, as I had time to continue continue being here, answering questions and like continuing the discussion, but Jamie and Tim had to drop off. But yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask, it looks like there's a cloud provider refactoring meeting that happens at this time also. Is that on a different Zoom, or are we stepping on top of their toes?
That's happening in a different Zoom.
Okay.
Zoom US/my/cloud provider.
Okay. Yeah. I just see a bunch of numbers at the top of their meeting notes, so I couldn't tell.
Yeah. So just to do a quick recap of what we talked about an hour ago, and that is Tim is gonna update the built-in into the API server we have an etcd client in 1.8. That client is 3.1. That client, the 3.1 client, actually has a bug when having multiple etcd instances and multiple masters, which actually hit Monzo in their postmortem. You can read about that. So that's really unfortunate. It's probably going to be fixed in some way in the next patch release of Kubernetes. But also Tim is for 1.9 going to bump this to 3.2, which have fixed this bug.
Do we have our own client, or are we using the same client that the rest of Kubernetes is using?
It's built into the API server.
Okay. So we're going to pick up the changes that like the API machinery SIG puts into the API server to fix the bug.
Yeah, so it's nothing Kubernetes specific. It's just what the API server, the code the API server uses for talking to etcd. So yeah, but the etcd server was 3.0 in 1.8. It will be for new clusters. It will be 3.2 in 1.9 for kubeadm, which is worth mentioning.
How much testing have we done on 3.2?
Well, that was... So I'm not sure if Tim is going to bump every new... So I think the proposal was for new clusters use 3.2, for upgraded cluster use 3.1. I'm not...
The proposal for kubeadmin or for Kubernetes in general, right? So we've had a problem in the past where it's not clear sort of who owns etcd. I would propose that it's API machinery SIG that owns etcd and not us in terms of selecting which version gets tested and validated for Kubernetes releases. And so if we want to use 3.2, we should probably go ask them to qualify 3.2 with 1.9 and sort of announce that should be the default for 1.9 clusters. instead of going off on our own. Because I don't want us to have to qualify, maintain, and support a whole bunch of different system components because we're diverging from what the other SIGs are doing. Right.
Yeah, I think if we can get the whole Kubernetes onto 3.2, we'll do 3.2. If not, I have the same opinion as you. Like, we should stick to 3.1 if that's what has been vetted by the large scale testing of GKE.
Yeah, I know that the impetus for bumping up to etcd 3 in the first place was driven by the scalability SIG, and from the Google side by Wojtek, because they wanted that to be able to hit their target for 5,000 node clusters. Once we hit that target, as far as I can tell, the scalability SIG sort of lost interest in continuing to push forward, and it's not, the API machinery SIG doesn't seem to have picked up the torch, and so I don't think anybody's actively owning etcd and keeping the train rolling forward. And Justin's complained multiple times about upgrades and how we don't have a great support mechanism for upgrades. So I think this is sort of a broader issue, and maybe we should bring this up with their SIG or in the community meeting, that we feel like, or maybe a SIG architecture, that we feel like this is an area that doesn't have active ownership, and that we don't want to be the people driving this, but we feel like we're stuck in that position to keep the ball moving forward with kubeadm.
Yeah, a thing that would help this immensely is if we could start running scale testing on top of kubeadm clusters, right? And we've talked about this multiple times. Is a problem like programming power, or is it money?
What do you mean by money?
So, like, for running for duplicating for some period, like, I mean, I do realize that spinning up every 3 hours 5,000 nodes and whatever is costly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the money cost, though. It's the time cost, too, of people actively having to support another set of tests that may or may not be working and trying to debug issues. And I think that the bigger our test matrix gets, the harder it is for us to keep track of everything. Like, I have an email starred from like a week and a half ago from when Saad announced the sort of termination of the build cop rotation. And I was complaining about the fact that we didn't have alerts for tests failing, and someone pointed out that we did. But I haven't gotten around to trying to figure out how to set those up. So, but like, we should be notified. Like, we should either use SIG Cluster Lifecycle plus test failures, or we should set up a separate mailing list for when test grid goes red, so that we are actively notified. Because right now it's just when somebody happens to go look at it, which is not working well.
Yeah,
like even that, like, nobody's gotten around to doing, even though it was announced. And so I worry that trying to maintain another set of tests is more of the problem than even the cost of running another set of tests.
I see. Yeah. This is definitely a SIG architecture and probably even steering committee thing to talk about. Like, how do we manage? How should we manage our SIGs to divide this work between themselves?
I mean, it's all the components too, right? It's like, do we bump the version of kubedns, or do we let the networking SIG bump the version of kubedns? Do we choose kubedns versus core DNS, or does the networking SIG choose kubedns or core DNS, right? Like, we are writing an installer that has to have some opinion about what to install, but are we forming that opinion ourselves, or are we letting the other SIGs tell us what we should be running, right? And I think that's really the question here. etcd is one component. The bigger problem with etcd is nobody is seeming to be owning it. But it's true for every component that we launch as part of kubeadm, right?
Yeah.
And it's implicit for things like the API server, the controller manager. Like, you just pick the Kubernetes version of those components. But when we have a cloud controller manager, how do we pick which version of that to run if it's built out of tree? And etcd is out of tree. kubedns is out of tree. We aren't opinionated about installing the dashboard or Heapster or FluentD or anything else today. But once we have add-on management, how do we specify those versions, and who tells us which versions to launch, right? So it's sort of, I think it's a bigger problem that we need to figure out how to solve.
Yeah.
While we were talking, I looked up, GKE is still running 3.0.17. for etcd. And the person on our side that's been driving etcd is Joe Betts. So, and I'm not sure if he's on the SIG API machinery. If he is, then maybe that's an implicit notion of ownership there.
How come is the current etcd version on GKE 3.0.17? Did you check at head or 1.8?
Oh, I just looked at what's running today, so I don't know.
Oh,
if
yeah,
that is different.
That was what I thought. Yeah, so 1.8.
Let me check.
1.8 is having everything 3.0. Head should right now have 3.1.
Okay, I don't see anything different on head, from what I can tell.
That's case worrying. I mean, Joe and Chow sent a PR. Well, Chow, I think, sent a PR a month ago or something similar to bump everything, including GKE, was the intent, to 3.1 at head. And Joe pushed the images and LGTM the PR. So.
Okay, I will check in with them today and see what they say.
Cool.
I wouldn't be surprised if they bumped Cube up and forgot to make the corresponding bump in GKE. I can't remember if that's a place where we've diverged from Cube up. Some of the config we just use verbatim, and some of it we have overwritten.
I mean, probably in alpha clusters or whatever right now. So that was what we talked about. Then we concluded that kubeadm will upgrade, in kubeadm upgrade in 1.9, kubeadm will upgrade etcd to 3.1, right? As part of the upgrade procedure, as that is the officially vetted version for Kubernetes 1.9. And this will happen before the control plane components. It is a static pod, so we'll just do the same manifest shuffling around on disk. So we basically rename the real manifest part to a backup directory. We'll write the new static pod manifest. We'll check, is etcd coming up correctly? If it is, we'll just proceed. If it's not, we'll roll back the old static pod manifest, check, is it coming up correctly? If it isn't, luckily we snapshotted the data directory while etcd in the beginning, and we'll just tell the user, well, you should now run this rm and move command or whatever to add this, to restore this backup directory. But this shouldn't be a problem.
You say you snapshotted the directory. Are you literally doing a directory copy to snapshot it, or are you running an etcd control command to snapshot the database?
Just cp command.
Okay. Do we know if that's safe? With the wall files, I feel like they could get corrupted. The tail of them could be corrupted if we're copying.
I don't know, and that's something we have to check up before doing this. But I would, if it's possible, it would be so much nicer to do a cp command versus building in the client into kubeadm and then start executing out to.
And then the other question I had was, when you say we see if it comes up healthy, how are we validating that? Are we just checking etcd's status endpoint to see if etcd thinks it's healthy, or are we validating that the Kube API server is still able to successfully talk to etcd and get and read data from it?
And it's the former. If etcd says it's healthy, because we haven't upgraded, right? So I mean, it's this in between case where we upgrade etcd first, then we upgrade Kubernetes, and I mean,
but I guess you're presuming that if etcd says it's healthy, the rest of the system works. And since the client should work with the newer version of etcd, the existing API server should be happy even if you update etcd to 3.2
Exactly.
and the old API server is still running.
Yeah, I mean the 3.1 client.
Might want to check that.
So actually, we have a 3.1 client in the Kube API server of 1.8, which is well. So I mean, as we have the client version higher than the server, as we're like ahead with the client,
Yes,
it is safe to do this. Yeah.
Right, but when you're saying like we check that etcd is healthy, it seems like we should also check that the API server hasn't gone belly up as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if the API server exposes anything that says I'm hosed, etcd isn't working from my point of view, or not. Like you can obviously get it through the logs, right? Like you can scrape the logs and see that it's not working.
That is a really good point. Yeah.
It'll start producing 500, so I don't know if we can tell that easily.
I mean, at least some basic tests like that Kubernetes can get, like I can get component statuses, or I can like do a / version
like
check
get pods or something.
Yeah, get pods. Yeah.
Well, I think get component status is actually, well, unless the API server itself sets itself unhealthy when it can't talk to etcd, get component status doesn't actually touch etcd directly. All it does is send HTTP requests to the master components and ask them all if they're healthy. So if you're already asking etcd if it's healthy, it's not actually doing any extra checking unless the API server sets itself unhealthy. But if you do like a get pods, like I guess there's a whole bunch of caching in the way. But like I'm trying to think of something that will actually like write through or read through to etcd.
Yeah, some kind of test there is will be good. Yeah, so that was what we talked about first. Then we conclude just a couple of PSAs. CNI 06, we bumped the version from 0.51 to 0.60. And, well, of course, we encountered some kind of issue with the kubelet integration. So just a heads up that SIG-Node and SIG-Network is looking into this, and it's marked for 1.9. I mean, it will be a critical bug, or I don't know if folk will fix it. I believe so. Otherwise, we'll have to roll back. If we do roll back, it will get really tricky because IPv6 support won't make it, and things like that. But yeah, just so we know about it. At head, kubeadm is tested against the new CNI version, so that's okay. And just to be clear, the CNI 06 thing is from what I understand, kind of scalability issue, more that the latency, well, the issue is named create pod latency increase with the new CNI version. And actually, it seems like we have a PR up already. Cool. Yeah. So just so we have that in tracking as well. Then a PSA that IPv6 support is coming in 1.9, which also affects kubeadm. I've seen pretty many pull requests from the SIG-Network team lately, adding kubeadm support, IPv6 support to kubeadm. Mostly like where we do use IPv4 addresses, we now have IPv6 address there instead. And this is an all or nothing thing. So you either have one IPv4 cluster or you have IPv6. I don't think things are upgradable from IPv4 to IPv6. I think it's net new.
Okay. Does it work in a mixed mode where some things are 6 and some things are 4, or do they just not talk to each other at all? I will invite the author to the next meeting. But if you're an IPv6, does that mean all of your pod IPs are also v6 IPs as well, presumably? And your service CIDR is a v6 CIDR, and everything is v6, right?
Yeah. So that's basically what I've seen in the PRs to kubeadm.
Do you know how we test that? Because I know that like GCE doesn't support IPv6, right? So we can't set up GCE EDE tests that use the IPv6 stuff. I don't know if AWS or somewhere else does that we can run these things in an automated fashion.
I think
maybe Rackspace.
I think Packet does. So and as Packet is like CI provider for CNCF somehow, from what I understand, they're using kubeadm, maybe Docker and Docker as well, and then running on Packet servers which support IPv6 and, well, test things there. I think if they don't have already, they will make at least EDE tests for this. Because, well, it's a large change.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we need to get some CI running on v6 if we claim to support it. Otherwise, we don't actually support it. We just have code in place. We don't know if it works.
Exactly.
And ideally, that would be a test aggregated into our dashboards. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, I mean, I don't personally claim that I will, I personally will support IPv6 in kubeadm. It's more that, well, I review PRs, I approve them as they are good. Then if SIG network has like tests, as you said, that we see are green constantly, then I can say like there's a fairly good chance that things work.
Right. I guess that's my only point is it's fine to merge the code and say it's experimental. But if we want to actually put it in the release notes, kubeadmin supports IPv6 clusters, like that needs to be backed up by some testing. And I don't think we are the ones to do that testing. No.
And yeah, I'll invite him to the next meeting on Tuesday. So that's cool. Along the same lines, we have Windows support for kubeadm join.
Cool.
Which is, yeah, did you have any spontaneous reactions?
No. Did I have any what?
Spontaneous reactions? Yeah, cool.
We should support Windows. We should support Solaris, whatever else people want to put in there, right?
So
assuming the kubelet actually works, right? I've heard people are working on getting the kubelet to run on Windows and things like kubeproxy and services and so forth.
Yeah, so I think
progress of that at all.
In 1.5 they added the alpha version. Then it has stayed kind of unmodified or something, like waiting for Windows upstream something during the spring. And I think they resumed the work Q3, Q2 something, and now they're up to speed and wanting to make it beta in 1.9, I think. So again, here we have the same situation. There's another SIG actually owning this. They have added 2 PRs that have been like low volume, right? It's basically just writing to another part on Windows than if we're on Linux, right? So if we do,
I think one thing we're gonna have to figure out. One thing we have to figure out here is our support model, because if people run kubeadmin and it doesn't work, they're going to come to us first, even if it's a feature that someone from another SIG has added and we've said, yeah, that seems to work, and we've seen your tests and they look green. They're still going to come to us for support first. And we need to figure out how we want to handle that. Do we want to try and support them directly? Do we want to redirect them to the other SIG? Is there a way, if we want to do the latter, that we can do that automatically without them hopping through us first and giving them a slower experience? So I think as we get more of these things, it's going to become more of a problem, because we'll have less direct experience. Like, I will have never run kubeadmin on a Windows node, and I won't know how it's supposed to look or how it's supposed to work, and I won't know how to help someone debug.
Yeah, I think, well, those issues probably have to be at least triaged first in the kubeadm repo, mentioning the right SIGs. If it turns out to be a Kubernetes issue, we'll have to move to the Kubernetes repo or whatever. If we have Kubernetes/SIG Windows as such a repo, we can move there.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like and make sure that people who are coming in and just sending us PRs, adding features, are also signing up to do the rest of the process, right? They're signing up to do support and to do maintenance, and they're not just throwing code over the wall saying, great, it works, and now I'm going to leave, right? And expect us to carry the torch forward, right? The same way with etcd, like, someone needs to actually own that and keep owning it going forward. We need to make sure that as we are the owners of kubeadmin, we are making sure that people that send us code are also signing up to help us maintain the system.
Yeah. I mean, as we've concluded with GKE, like this will be more and more the case, right? So right now, when someone adds a new feature to Kubernetes, they have to add it to kubeup or like, well, GKE code, GCE code to test it. And as we migrate these things to, well, kubeadm and the cluster API eventually, it will become a more and more this, as you say, communication redirection issue for issues. I mean, we don't want kubeadm to end up like the Kubernetes main issue tracker.
I agree, yeah. And then I saw the last thing in the meeting notes was HA with no notes underneath it. Did you guys not get a chance to talk about HA?
We did, but somehow I dropped off. I probably talked too much, so I didn't have time to write down things. I'll recap now. So first thing, etcd operator. There we go. And Jamie has cycles to work on this. He recently sent a PR. Here we go with the official proposal as well. I had hoped Fabrizio would be here today. He haven't attended either meetings, so we'll see how we're gonna convert the proposal, or we'll just leave the proposal one more week or whatever in this form. I mean, the most important part now is that we start attacking with code, start actually writing things, getting it behind the feature gate, getting the tests up before it's too late, right? This is going to be an extremely short cycle. We recently got Kubernetes 1.8 out the door, and now code freeze is coming up in 3 weeks, something like that. So 3-4 weeks. So and then we have KubeCon in the middle of like code freeze or the stabilization period. So the one of the critical parts is the etcd operator. Jamie just sent the PR, which I could link to here, for add self-hosted API to kubeadm. Basically, just in our config file, adding a pointer to a struct with self-hosted etcd parameters. And this is in line with the API guidelines, like add new features, especially the alpha ones, as pointers. So that's the thing. He did this so it's easy to well, he split it up his PRs to not have one 3,000 line, 5,000 line change, and instead have multiple smaller ones. I mean, my upgrades PR in the end, I actually counted, and I split it up 18 times. So,
I mean, and that's good. That makes it much easier to review.
Yeah, while having this like single pull request that has all the changes if you want to test. So, yeah, that's a good pattern.
Is Fabrizio owning taking the comments in the doc? Because I know that both Wojtek and I left a bunch of comments, consolidating those and turning it into a pull request? Or do we not know since he hasn't been at the last couple of meetings?
Oh, cool. Wojtek also commented. Cool. I think Fabrizio's. Well, I'll help him out as well to answer something. But yeah, from what I understand, he's owning that part. Yeah. At this point, do we have any questions?
No, I peppered you with questions for 45 minutes, so I think I'm good.
Yeah, so etcd operator is the first one. Jamie will take ownership there, start sending more pull requests. He also has some work in progress. The scheduling thing, the node not ready conditions and things like that will be beta in 1.9, so we can actually deploy pods before we have the networking. He talked, yeah. I should write that down. In 1.9, be possible. Pods, not only daemon sets, before a CNI network is set up. Which is actually one of the prerequisites for this feature to work. Then he mentioned another interesting issue, the etcd operator, where it relies on kubeDNS. But at this point, again, we don't have kubeDNS. So we have to use IP address, the internal service IP address there instead of a resolvable inside of the cluster DNS name. So need to modify the operator to use internal service IPs instead of DNS. Okay, that was the next thing we talked about. We need some kind of, yeah, so we need some kind of IP tables checkpointing for reboots to work with that etcd operator. CoreOS, yeah, feel free to say.
Why is that? What do they etcd operator do with IP tables?
So imagine you're rebooting your etcd operator cluster, like your etcd operator master. First the kubelet comes up. Well, I want to talk to the API server, but the API server isn't there. Then we have the checkpointer inside of the kubelet, the bootstrap checkpointer, which sees that, well, I was running these 3 pods. I will restore them. This is the thing Tim is working on right now. And then we'll get up the API server, the controller manager, and the scheduler. Now the API service in turn is going to say, well, I don't have an etcd like pod to run. Or it will actually talk to the etcd cluster IP, right? So then we need kubeproxy as well, and this networking rule, right? So we checkpoint the etcd pod, which will also come up, but the actual binding here, like so that the API server can address etcd, needs to be checkpointed. Otherwise, well, this won't resolve.
Okay, Wojtek had asked in the doc, and I was also curious why we're not hitting etcd over localhost. If we're going to run etcd on every single master by default, it's always available on localhost if we've checkpointed the pod and it comes back up, and then we don't have this problem.
Yeah. I think
something to consider. We don't have to answer there.
Yeah. Actually, that could be a feature request to the operator, right? The problem here is, like, we stated that we don't want to like rewrite all the etcd handling code, right? Hence, we're using the etcd operator. But the etcd operator is made for applications on top of Kubernetes. not Kubernetes itself. And for applications of Kubernetes, it's totally fine to run things as normal pods with backing services. We have everything this, and it worked great inside of Kubernetes, like magical landscape. But for our case, indeed, it would be much more helpful if that CD operator would actually replicate a daemon set, daemon set kind of scheduling policy or whatever. So it would like assign this one pod to the first master, the second pod to the other master, and etc. But still handle the lifecycle of etcd with backup snapshots, restores, version upgrades, and these things. That's why we're using the etcd operator.
Yes, but if it's not designed to work for the case we need, then the question is it harder to fix it or to not use it? And if we have to build a whole other layer of checkpointing, that seems kind of silly. Maybe we should figure out if we can make the etcd operator work for our use case, and talk to CoreOS about that.
I'll definitely talk to Jamie about that, and maybe.
And I noticed that Fabrizio just joined. You said had a couple of things you wanted to ask him.
Yeah.
Hi all.
Hi. We were just wondering if you need help with answering questions in the doc, or what the status is there.
There are 2 or 3 questions which are really interesting from Robert and also from another person. I guess that the most interesting part is that we have to hardening the bootstrap process, making sure that we are able to move from a single master to multiple master, handling the process of changing certificates and so on and so on. So there are 2 or 3 questions that for me are worth of some work from you and team. But,
yeah, shoot. Yeah, go on. Just say the questions you wanted to have answered to, like, or at least I should answer offline, async.
Okay, I will point you out to the 2 or 3 questions.
Okay, and we also talked about security / auditing, and concluded that we know that 1.9, like this AJ flow in 1.9 won't be as secure as we'd like it to be. There are obvious ways you could escalate power in the cluster, and more authorization features are added, this will hopefully get into a production ready state. Anything more to add there? This is what I wrote down now for offense status. Just to mention these 2 obvious ones. When using secrets, like when hosting the credentials as secrets, it's easy for a node to re-register or patch itself with the master label. So I will get daemon set pods, the master's pods assigned to me which will make the node authorizer grant me access to all the secrets in the cluster, including the CA key. So then I basically can turn my, with 2 requests, that basically 2 commands, I can turn my node credential, like add a new node to my cluster, to a CA key credential. So, but this is something SIG is working on. Mike actually answered yesterday that it won't make 1.9, but it's a more long-term effort, and from what I understand, I mean, hopefully 1.10 or something. But it's hard when we don't have this centralized database of what nodes are authorized to do what in the cluster, what nodes do I actually expect. And this is a consequence of keeping the flow dynamic instead of static, right? And so that's one, and the other is like my ingress controller will watch all secrets in the cluster and has access to all secrets in the cluster. That means if someone hacks my ingress controller, they will also get my CA key for free. Well, and other workloads in the cluster as well. Like I have my whatever pod that I don't want, that I turned off RBAC for, like basically granted cluster admin, and then, well, it indeed can get my CA key if it wanted to. But with Mike has a PR for explicitly denying an authorization request for certain certain types of requests. So the goal here is to make some kind of authorizer that will deny these secrets. Like unless you're super user cluster admin, it will deny you access to these secrets that contain information that potentially can be used to escalate power in the cluster. So that was the 2 things we talked about as well.
Sorry, but if I got it right, those kind of limitation is something that we are going to accept and document for the time being, but they are not considered blocking.
They are not considered blocking for 1.9. But
because we are going out under feature gates.
Yes, because this is everything behind the feature gate should be mentioned twice or 3 times or 4 times. And heavily locked down. Like it won't affect any normal production-ready user. And more of an experimental testing right now. Is this something we can get to production greatness? If it isn't, we have to like go back to the drawing board and see what we can do instead. But this is the MVP we're trying to achieve in 1.9. Then we'll see, is this something we can proceed with to 1.10, like beta, and then continue to enhance towards GA.
Okay, so only one question from my side on HA. Is there already a checklist of things that we can, where I can contribute also in implementation?
Yeah, so what we must do now, if we want to have something for 1.9, so as mentioned, this is a really short cycle. If we want to get this into 1.9, which we want to, we need coding power. But that also means myself that what it now seems I'm more like coordinating all our forces. I won't have that much time to actually write code, which means my definite like it's a definite requirement for me and yourself, Fabrizio, to get a good list of the different things we need to have in place for others to implement after that.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
this is my biggest worry, because time is going on and in fact, the only person which is implementing something is Jamie.
Yeah, so Jamie has the etcd operator right now. An hour ago, I asked Andrew to maybe do the kubeproxy, like resolving multiple masters addresses from via an VIP from the node's point of view. So basically, resolving multiple API servers from the node. Andrew may be able to tackle that. Then we'll have, what else? We need someone to enhance the way we upgrade self-hosted clusters, to be a bit safer. And we need someone that would write code for upgrading etcd, this 3.0 to 3.1 migration.
Okay, let's work at this list in offline, and I think that we are finished with the time.
Yeah, we are. Time's up, and oh well. So the meeting is starting right now. The other. Robert, are you starting the cluster API meeting right now?
Yeah, just about now. If you want to stop your recording, I'll start recording that one if you need to take off.
Yeah. I have to. Sorry, folks, but I have to close the meeting, end the meeting, and then Robert will restart in a minute when he gets to his room. Okay. Bye.